Okay, so you've really given us something fascinating to sink our teeth into this time.
Mhm.
A whole collection of articles and research, all focused on the G-spot and, well, the bigger picture of female sexuality.
Yeah, it's quite the topic.
It is. And our goal here in this deep dive is really to pull out the most, compelling bits, the most important information from all these sources, give you a clear path, hopefully an engaging one, to understanding this area. It's often intriguing, but sometimes maybe a bit confusing.
Absolutely. We're basically trying to create a concentrated dose of knowledge. We'll be navigating through questions like, does the G-spot even exist? What makes its orgasms different?
Right.
Exploring the science kind of behind female ejaculation, looking at stimulation techniques, and also, crucially, the role of emotional connection.
Okay. All right. So let's just jump right in then.
Yeah.
One of the first things this book we're looking at tackles pretty much head on is the big question. Does the G-spot actually exist?
Yeah.
It's a fair question, right?
Yeah.
I imagine some listeners might be wondering the same thing.
It really is a valid point to start with. And the book itself, it acknowledges this G-spot phenomenon right at the beginning. But interestingly, the idea isn't exactly brand new. No, our sources point to mentions even way back. Aristotle, apparently. So this concept, it's been floating around for quite a while.
Aristotle. Wow. Which makes you wonder why there's still, so much debate or maybe mystery around it today.
Exactly.
And the book throws out this really striking statistic saying millions of women might go through their whole lives without ever experiencing G-spot pleasure.
It's quite a thought, isn't it?
It really is.
It really underscores why understanding this is, well, important. This particular book we dove into, it aims not just to provide evidence for G-spot orgasms and female ejaculation, but also to explore their potential for what it calls ultimate female ecstasy. It really tries to unravel why these things happen and maybe why they've been overlooked or, misunderstood for so long.
Okay, so if the G-spot is potentially this key to ultimate ecstasy, what actually makes these orgasms so different? Different from, say, what we might think of as more typical clitoral or vaginal orgasms.
Well, the book draws a pretty sharp contrast. It actually calls the reality of conventional orgasms a dire truth in comparison.
The truth. Okay.
Yeah, strong words. It cites research suggesting the average duration of a, let's say, clitoral or vaginal orgasm is quite short, somewhere like 8 to 19 seconds.
8 to 19 seconds. That does seem surprisingly brief.
It does, doesn't it? Now, when we look at reports of G-spot orgasms, the picture often changes quite a bit. The book says they frequently last around 45 seconds.
45, okay.
And there are even accounts stretching into minutes, sometimes like tens of minutes in, exceptional cases.
Wow.
Plus, it includes some really compelling anonymous quotes, women describing them using words like deepest, most wonderful, calling it a whole body event.
A whole body event.
Yeah.
Yeah, that definitely paints a picture of something more profound. And didn't it also mention involuntary physical responses, things that happen with these orgasms?
Yes, exactly. And this is a key point. The book emphasizes that these physical signs, changes in breathing, pelvic contractions, and sometimes, significantly, the release of fluid female ejaculation, these are often involuntary. These observable reactions can really help confirm that an orgasm happened and give us clues about its distinct nature.
Right, because like one of the quotes said, it takes away some of the guesswork, maybe.
Precisely.
And the book even shared survey results. Women who'd experienced G-spot orgasms rated them, on average, a 10 for pleasure, compared to an 8 for clitoral and just a 6 for vaginal orgasms. That's a pretty big difference in how intense it feels.
It really is, yeah. And the language they used consistently included words like deeper, different, more fulfilling, more intense. Many women also talked about this sensation of heat spreading through their body, sometimes leading to sweating or, feeling like they need to throw the covers off. So clearly not just a localized thing.
Okay, so we're getting the picture. G-spot orgasms seem distinct,
Yeah.
often more powerful, but what's the biological reason? Why does the G-spot exist beyond just pleasure?
Okay, yeah, this is where it gets really interesting. The book talks about a potential dual purpose. So beyond the obvious sexual pleasure angle,
Right.
it references research, Whipple and Komisaruk suggesting a role in pain blocking during childbirth.
Pain blocking, how?
Well, their studies showed that self-stimulation of that anterior vaginal wall could significantly raise a woman's pain threshold. The thinking is this natural pain blocking effect might have a real biological advantage during labor.
That's actually fascinating. So it's not just pleasure. There could be this, physiological function tied to reproduction.
Mhm.
Makes you think how connected everything is.
Absolutely. And the book also mentions the difference between non-direct and direct G-spot stimulation.
Okay, what's that?
So, non-direct might happen during typical intercourse. Maybe when the penis swells, it indirectly stimulates the area. That could lead to those moments where someone says something like, "Oh, you started swelling and hitting something up there that felt great."
Ah, okay. I bet people listening might recognize that kind of comment. That could be a real aha moment for some.
It could be. Yeah, exactly. But the book really emphasizes that direct stimulation, specifically targeting the G-spot, that's often the key to unlocking that more profound orgasm potential we've been talking about.
Makes sense. Now, the term that often comes up alongside the G-spot is female ejaculation. Sometimes people call it squirting. The book makes a point of saying they aren't necessarily the same thing. Can you unpack that for us?
Sure. The book addresses this quite directly, actually, using a kind of helpful Q&A format. So female ejaculation itself is defined as the expulsion of liquid from the urethra.
The urethra, okay.
Yeah, it's a separate physiological event. It can happen alongside a G-spot orgasm for some women, but crucially, it doesn't always.
And what's the mechanism? Like, where does the fluid come from?
The book explains the link to the Steen's glands. They're often called the female prostate because they're similar to the male prostate and have similar functions, secreting fluids.
Okay.
These glands are right around the urethra, so during G-spot stimulation, they can get stimulated too, which can lead to fluid being released into the urethra and then, well, expelled. It's also worth mentioning, the book notes that for some women, even just clitoral stimulation can trigger ejaculation.
Oh, interesting. So it's not only linked to the G-spot,
Yeah.
but is
Yep.
it something all women can do? The sources seemed a bit maybe inconclusive on that.
That's a really accurate way to put it. The book does highlight that it's still being discussed in the scientific community. While finding certain things in the ejaculate, like fructose, suggests there's a real secretory function, seeing actual fluid expulsion during stimulation hasn't been consistently observed in all studies across all women. There's also this theory of retrograde ejaculation.
Retrograde. What's that?
It means the fluid might go backwards, like into the bladder, instead of out through the urethra.
Ah.
This could maybe explain why some women might feel a sudden urge to pee after orgasm and maybe release a little bit of clear or milky fluid without really realizing they've technically ejaculated.
That is a really interesting theory. It could definitely explain some of the different experiences people report or why some aren't aware of it. What did the survey data in the book say about how common it is?
Well, the survey showed that almost half the women who responded were either unsure if they'd ever ejaculated or said they hadn't. But interestingly, nearly the other half reported ejaculating specifically during a G-spot orgasm.
Wow, almost half in that context.
Yeah, and for most of those women, it was the first time they were consciously aware it happened.
That's pretty significant, especially for a first-time realization.
Yeah.
And the timing, does it always happen right at orgasm?
Seems like it varies. The book mentions a study from '98, Zaviachik and colleagues, that found some women ejaculated before orgasm, some right during the contractions, and others afterwards. So, yeah, no single fixed pattern, apparently.
Okay. Now, there's often this difference you hear about. Researchers might talk about a small amount of fluid, like a teaspoonful, but then you hear personal stories about drenching the bed. How does the book explain that difference?
It does try to tackle that, yeah. It suggests a few things. Maybe factors like dim lighting or just the general excitement of the moment could lead someone to overestimate how much fluid there actually is.
Makes sense.
And conversely, things like absorbent sheets or bedding might soak up more fluid, making it feel like a lot, even if the volume wasn't huge. The book also briefly touches on and then kind of counters the idea that it's just urinary stress incontinence.
Right. Some people suggest that.
Yeah, but it points out that physiologically, men can't urinate during orgasm as a comparison, though it does acknowledge some women might experience, like, pre-orgasmic urination.
Which really just highlights the need for more research, doesn't it? To, destigmatize it and avoid misdiagnosing things.
Absolutely. A clearer understanding helps everyone, really. It helps normalize a natural response.
Okay. Now, the book we've been pulling from, it has this subtitle, A 10-Step Guide for Unleashing the Ultimate in Female Ecstasy. Obviously, we can't walk through all 10 steps right now.
No, definitely not.
But can you give us a feel for the technique? What are some of the key ideas, maybe the early stages?
Sure. Well, right off the bat, the book stresses that having a consistent partner in a safe, loving relationship makes success more likely. It really puts a lot of weight on that emotional foundation.
That's important.
Very. The initial steps, they have names like priming, foreplay, and even more foreplay.
Right.
It's all about setting a romantic mood, building that emotional bond and physical arousal. Interestingly, it even suggests not mentioning the G-spot directly at first
Oh, why is that?
to kind of minimize any potential performance anxiety, keep it natural.
So it's a slow build, focusing on intimacy first.
Exactly. Then there's a step called teasing. This involves focusing touch mainly above the breast level initially, while still sort of gradually increasing blood flow down below. The book really pushes patience and self-control here.
Hmm.
After that comes the go-ahead sign. This is about watching your partner's body language, subtle hip movements, things like that. Signs are ready for more direct stimulation. Then there's hovering.
Hovering.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Bringing your hand really close to the vulva, but not quite touching. The idea is to amp up arousal and maybe encourage the partner to actually say what feels good. It seems designed to really open up communication.
That sounds like a clever way to build anticipation and dialogue.
I thought so too. Then, logically, it moves to locating her G-spot. The book describes it as roughly 1.5 inches inside on the front wall, often feels a bit textured, maybe like the roof of your mouth, but firm,
Okay.
then stimulating the G-spot.
Mm-hmm.
It advises gentle circular motions, light pressure at first. A slow, steady rhythm is key, and it warns against speeding up just because your partner asks, especially initially.
Resist the urge to go faster.
Got it. Right. The book also talks about a point of no return with G-spot orgasms, where the sensations build rapidly in waves. The final steps, the big O draws near, and you're there. Describe the physical signs, vaginal contractions, more wetness, maybe ejaculation, and then the intense release.
It sounds like a really considerate, step-by-step method that definitely prioritizes communication and paying attention.
Absolutely. And woven all through that technique description, the book keeps coming back to the emotional aspect. It really hammers home how crucial and often underestimated that is for orgasm.
Yes, it makes a strong point that for a lot of women, emotional closeness is key to reaching orgasm at all, not just G-spot orgasm.
Exactly. It shares survey data where emotional intimacy, sharing feelings with a loved one, was actually the top answer for what gives the most pleasure during sex.
Wow.
Yeah. And the book connects feeling uncomfortable or lacking trust directly to maybe having trouble reaching G-spot orgasm. It
Right.
really encourages open communication, building that strong emotional base.
And the tips from experienced users and those case studies sections in the book really bring that emotional side to life, don't they?
They really do. You get these firsthand accounts talking about how vital romance and connection are, how foreplay needs to start way before the bedroom sometimes, people sharing the surprise and sheer intensity of their first G-spot orgasm or ejaculation, how these experiences can actually strengthen relationships, build more trust.
Yeah.
There are even comments about how it can boost a male partner's self-confidence. And you also hear about the learning curve, how it might be tricky at first, but gets easier, more enjoyable with practice. Women clearly distinguishing the feeling of G-spot orgasms from others. And yeah, that recurring theme of surprise around female ejaculation pops up a lot in those stories.
It really adds that human layer,
Oh.
reinforces that it's about way more than just hitting the right spot.
Precisely. And to add even more depth, the book includes this interview with an anonymous renowned sex researcher. They offer some really valuable perspectives.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
What were some of the main takeaways from the researcher?
Well, they really emphasized how important it is for a woman to be comfortable with her own body, to communicate openly with her partner, to be willing to experiment, and also to kind of own her orgasm, take responsibility for her pleasure.
Good points.
Physiologically, they talked more about the differences. Like, with a G-spot orgasm, the uterus might push down, the vaginal opening might widen, whereas with a clitoral orgasm, the uterus often pulls up, and the outer part of the vagina contracts. They confirmed G-spot orgasms often feel deeper.
Okay.
The researcher also backed up the idea that female ejaculation and G-spot orgasm don't always happen together, and that, yeah, most women probably expel some fluid from glands into the urethra during various kinds of stimulation. They identified the fluid source as the female prostate gland, containing things like glucose, fructose.
Right. And what about practical stuff, like finding it or any risks?
Yeah. They described the location similarly halfway between pubic bone and cervix along the urethra, felt by pressing into the upper vaginal wall, that come here finger motion. But they did note self-location can be tricky sometimes.
Huh.
Health-wise, the main benefit is pleasure, the main risks. Potential discomfort or maybe minor trauma if stimulation is too rough or, long fingernails get involved. They also mention that pain blocking effect again.
Okay.
But importantly, the researcher cautioned against making G-spot orgasm the ultimate goal. Like, it's mandatory for good sex. Preferences vary so much. Enjoying the whole experience is what matters.
That's a really healthy perspective.
Totally. They also touched on societal stuff, how messages can make women uncomfortable exploring their own bodies, and just reiterated that sexuality is way bigger than just orgasm. It's about the relationship, communication, caring, intimacy, all of it.
Yeah.
Oh, and they briefly mentioned Kegels for strengthening pelvic floor muscles, good for everyone, and acknowledged that things change with age physiologically, but stressed enjoying sensuality at any stage of life.
That really pulls it all together nicely, doesn't it? Blending the personal stories with the science and that broader perspective, it definitely gives a richer, more nuanced view of the G-spot and female sexuality overall.
Absolutely. It reinforces that while, yeah, the G-spot can be a huge source of pleasure for many, it's so intertwined with emotional well-being, communication, and just feeling comfortable and knowledgeable about your own body and desires.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the sources you sent over, we really hope that you, listening, have picked up some valuable insights, maybe even some surprising ones, about the G-spot and this whole fascinating area of female sexuality.
Yeah, our aim was really just to pull out those key pieces of info, give you that focused understanding without drowning you in detail, hopefully hitting those aha moments you were looking for.
And thinking about everything we've touched on, the potential for that intense pleasure, the deep link to emotional closeness, the whole intriguing phenomenon of female ejaculation, it definitely gives you food for thought, doesn't it?
For sure.
So maybe just consider how this information might shift your own understanding of sexual pleasure and connection. And maybe what new questions this whole exploration sparked for your own journey of learning and discovery.